All right, we are back. This is Titans Talk on News Channel 5 Plus. Steve Lehman here with you tonight. Our phone lines are open, 737-7767. We will get to some discussion about the Titans, 4-3, first place, entering the second half of the year, which starts Sunday against the Ravens at high noon over at Nissan Stadium, which you can watch, by the way, in spectacular high definition over on News Channel 5. And we'll also continue our conversation. I just went off in the last segment about the Texans' use of the national anthem for kneeling and protest again in response to what their owner, Bob McNair, said during a closed-door NFL meeting last week about the NFL's business and what impact that has. So if you want to chime in on that, we've had a lively discussion about the NFL protests so far this season, so I see no reason why tonight would be any different. So if you would like to chime in, feel free, give us a call. 737-7767 is the number. First up tonight is Steven. Steven, thanks for the call. Thanks for waiting. You are on the air.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Look, I've been selling Titans tickets for years, and I ain't never seen nothing like this in the NFL. I follow them at the Oilers and multiple teams. I grew up in Pittsburgh and everything. And I just don't know. I don't know where this world's coming to here with all this protesting and everything. I just don't even know which way to look. And honestly, that stuff up there on the hill with Knoxville and Butch James and everything, this is just, it seems like Tennessee's just falling apart.
Well, I don't think it's just Tennessee. I think it's the country at the moment. This is a spot we've gotten to where you have to watch everything you've said. Because if you dare make a mistake, a slip of the tongue, people try to get into your head and think of this is what he means. This is his heart posture. And there's no way to do that. I mean, there's a very legitimate reason why the law doesn't get into people's minds. It's about actions and what you do. And so in the case of Bob McNair in Houston, when I read that, I first think of the context where he is. He's in a meeting talking about the business interest of the league, which have unquestionably been hurt by the protest. So when he uses an idiom to compare it to employees running the business, it makes sense. He screwed up the wording of the idiom. There's no question about that. But what he was trying to say actually makes sense. So first off, there's that. But then you look at his body of work of his life and the type of things he's been involved with and his actions with players on his team. All those sort of things. It just doesn't make sense that he's trying to be controversial or that he's trying to make a racist statement or prove his ownership of people or whatever came out of that. And it just blows my mind that that becomes the first thing people go to. That it isn't, oh man, honest mistake or a guy made a misstep there. But look at his body of work and who he really is as a person. The first thought is the worst possible thing of a person. And that, unfortunately, seems to be where we've gotten to in society today, that there are no second chances. There is no benefit of the doubt. It is, if you screw up, our first thought is you're the worst possible person, or this was the worst possible thing you can do. And to me, that's just a scary place to be in, and this weekend it crept into the NFL. And again, what happened this weekend is bad for the business of the NFL. No question about it. Back to the phones we go. Hello, Carl.
Hey, what's going on?
Good evening.
All right, how you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for the call.
Man, I'm listening to Steve. Steve, you ought to cut it out, man. If you can explain that to your children, what you just said, that's awesome. But I'm not going to bite it, you know what I mean? If what you saying, what Mr. McNair said about the players in the NFL being inmates, and we know that inmates are some of the worst. And I'm not trying to put them down, but the inmates are some of the worst people that, robbers, murderers, rapists, and you got to put that in context and how people would feel about that. And if I can explain that to my kids the way that you put it, it's kind of sad, brother.
Well, look, I think there's a lot of things that are sad, but
people have gave me a lot of chances in this world, and I appreciate that. And I don't hold it against Mr. McNair.
Well, I think that's very good of you, Carl, and I appreciate the call and your thoughts on this. My thing is just, you talk about the context of the inmates, and you're right. I mean, no one wants to be compared to a prisoner, and that's where he clearly botched what he was saying. But I think it was an honest mistake, because what he was seemingly trying to get across, the context of the conversation and the idiom, that's a 1,000-year-old idiom for people to say the inmates run the asylum. I think we've all heard that. Parents, I think, use it when their kids get out of the line and they say, look, you can't do everything because the inmates can't run the asylum. We've all heard that. We've probably all used it at some point. And I think it's reasonable to believe that's what he was trying to do right there. And so I think that's the context that matters the most in this situation. And especially when he was alerted to it, it's not like he ran from it and said, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I meant to say. He owned up to his mistake. And I think that's the thing where I thought the Texans players went over the line here is, hey, it's one thing to say, hey, man, you messed up. That's the wrong thing to say. Do you really mean that? But when the guy says, no, I didn't mean that. This was my point, and I'm sorry that it came out that way, and I certainly didn't want to offend any of you. I think you have to let it go on that.
You're right about that, and I respect that there. But it's like I don't think the players, they protesting about, rights in America. And every time we protest about the rights of America, we get some kind of offensive. What are y'all protesting? We know American haven't been right towards black. Now, if we can live up to that there and accept what American have done, we can move forward. But as long as we fight against it, it's going to be some more fight against it.
Well, Carl, thanks for the call. I appreciate that, and we've had that conversation. But here again, I think, and this has been sort of one of my long-standing stances about the protest as a whole, is I think they've chosen the wrong vehicle to get the message out. Because there's a big segment of the population that when you protest the actual country or the national anthem and the flag, even if the goal there is just to raise awareness for what your actual protest is about, and in their case, what they've said is systematic oppression in the country, racial inequality in our cities, police brutality, those things. Even when that may be the starting mission, when you use that vehicle, the flag and the anthem, you turn off a lot of people right away. It's a non-starter for the discussion. So I agree with you there. But here's what happened this weekend is the Texans took that and completely jumped shark. And now they're protesting something that I think most people just think is flat out ridiculous based off of what Bob McNair said. So now that only hurts the initial protest more, because now people are like, gosh, how do I even take you seriously when you're taking a knee over an owner using an idiom that my parents used, I've used, my teachers have used, everybody's used? That, I think, hurts. I said the business of the NFL. I think it hurts the protest as well. This was a no-win situation this weekend to me. Back to the phones and Butch. Butch, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Levin. I want to tell you something. Everything you've said has made more sense than anyone that I've heard throughout this period of dissent. But I just wanted to say this. If he'd have said you can't let the canary run the coal mine, would they have gone nuts tweeting that they're not canaries?
Sure.
I think that anybody with a brain and common sense can analyze the text in which he meant what he said and apply it accordingly. I agree with everything you said regarding him not considering his players prisoners. And as you said, look at the man, look at his history, what he's done to conduct himself in communities as an upstanding citizen and to pay it forward to a degree. And I think society as a whole has their radar up, just looking for something to pounce on. They're wound so tight. And, if anyone could play this across the country, what you've said here in the last hour, it opens up a lot of eyes and makes all the sense of the world. Emmy winning. Thank you.
Well, Butch, thank you very much for that. Look, I think sometimes us in the media are partly to blame for this because of the coverage we give to certain things, because of the way journalists on Twitter sometimes, I think Twitter in a lot of ways has made our job sensationalism. It's the quick-witted response that gets the retweets. It's sort of the insensitive response sometimes that gets the retweets. I think all of that has brought up sort of the worst in journalism at times, and that's played into this as well, for sure. So I think sometimes we all need to take a little bit of a breath and sit back and examine the situation. And I try. I mean, this really came out 3 or 4 days ago, and then yesterday is when we saw what the protest was. And I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything about the Bob McNair statement. I didn't say anything about what the Texans said last week when it happened, because I wanted to get the facts. I wanted to examine them more. I wanted to sit back, and I wanted to take a breath. And I did that last year with Kaepernick, and I've done that with a lot of those things. And I just don't think anybody takes breaths anymore. We're all so in a hurry to have our opinion out there. We're so in a hurry to be offended by things and to be victims and all those sort of things that we don't take the time to realize, is this a simple mistake? Is this the true meaning of what was said? Is this an actual place where people were aggrieved? Because there are real problems. I mean, our last caller had a very valid point about where we stand in America and the idea of we need to have real conversations about police brutality, how big of an issue it is, how severe it is, how to repair whatever the issue is. We need to talk about inner city gun violence. There are a lot of things we need to discuss as a country, but you can't have real conversations anymore, because if you disagree with the other person, they're immediately evil and they're wrong. That's how we all jump to conclusions. No one wants to take a breath. No one wants to listen anymore. And because of that, we get to situations like we got to this weekend with the Texans. All right, we got to take a break. We're running behind. We will get back to more phone calls on this right after this. Stay tuned. You're watching Titans Talk here on News Channel 5+.